going to have tea. Tea?
I'm an armchair traveler. I like to take aesthetic risks, maybe. That's about the limit.
Well, Rodney, I remember you saying to me one day, I don't know how you said it, but you said, sometimes I think I should just take my guitar and go.
All right, Ramblin' Man.
Yeah.
Let me try this guitar of Warren Murphy.
Most large cities, you're looking at the city. And here, there's always this other larger thing beyond the city. Except in the winter when it disappears and everyone goes mad. You can see hundreds of miles. You can see these mountains that are very far away. And it's very big. And I've often wondered what effect that has had on the art that this place produces.
When you look at Vancouver and the number of amazing artists the city has produced and sustained, there's something about Vancouver and how it feeds your soul and I think allows you to have a soul that people don't want to leave.
And if you see how Rodney lives a Vancouver lifestyle, the personal life and what he does in his photography, it overlaps so much.
A lot of the work is about not the city or the country, but kind of the edge, and this kind of space between the experience and the representation. I think that's kind of a constant in the work.
It would be wrong to say that he seems to me to be totally of this place, but I can't actually imagine where else he could have come from and done the work that he's doing.
Rodney could live and work anywhere in the world. Why has he chosen throughout his entire career to stay here? But I think it's because he's able to look at everything and see so much that he's never done mining the inspiration that his hometown provides him. And I think Rodney, in all his depictions, whether it's in the light boxes, in the film, in the sculptural works, they all connect back to your surroundings and your everyday.
I don't know anyone else that's doing that with their city and putting themselves into the picture like that. But Rodney watches culture.
He can stop and look at a record shop, like a secondhand record shop on Main Street, and find an entire world on one album cover, on one dusty corner, the side of the clerk with his, ratty concert t-shirt standing behind the counter. He finds so much on it every day. He doesn't run out of inspiration.
Main Street's been the dividing line between the haves and the have-nots throughout the history of Vancouver. Now Vancouver's changed so much in the last 10 years that it's so expensive that the West Side children actually move to Main Street. I will say that my favorite place on Main Street is the Liberty Cafe.
So this morning we're at the Liberty Bakery, is here on Main Street.
It's a bakery that Shannon and Scott from my studio and we bought the business.
And this Main Street, not very far from your studio, it is a place that you've returned to quite a few times now in the work.
Actually, a number of light boxes were kind of inspired by scenes on the street. The old punk on payphone, the sous chef, avid reader, and also the drywaller.
And the new piece, the antiquarian, the shopkeeper falling asleep.
Yeah, actually, that's the shop just a few blocks down the street. That was the kind of inspiration. There's a couple of shops, antique shops. One called Alexander Lamb, one called Baker's Dozen. The people who run it were kind of inspiration for it.
Thinking about Vancouver as a place as being kind of a sense of the end of the line. The idea of isolation, remoteness, certainly like 30 years ago, it must have been even more the sense of being remote and far
Yeah, that's
away.
true. It's always had a good. University of British Columbia was a kind of a hotbed of artistic activity. I mean, Ian Wallace was there, Jeff Wall was there. When Jeff and Ian started teaching at the University of British Columbia, they brought in a lot of guest lecturers. People like Dan Graham, who really had a big influence on the local scene. It was when I was an undergraduate. I didn't know really what I was going to pursue. I knew I wanted to do something in the creative field, like maybe be a writer. I didn't really know. And then I discovered Roussel. It was kind of the connection between art and visual arts and literature. And it kind of became a kind of reference point for me, you know.
Rodney's references are so vast and varied, but they're never in your face.
The problem with locating kind of influences with Rodney is you end up with, it's a very big tree with a lot of branches.
A complex images, complex concepts, complex references through culture and history and literature and music. It's all there for you, but it doesn't force you to have to take it on.
A lot of his early work was very dry, especially the work throughout the 80s was extremely dry, and it's not until really Vexation Island that you get the wet. The work turns around at that moment. I think he gives access right off the bat. So he reverses it, he turns the structure around and makes it very publicly accessible, and then it becomes more difficult to find the seriousness.
My earlier work was more conceptual and the backstory was kind of important, and I kind of got tired of telling this, you know, like the narrative. I mean, the works had to be kind of explained or contextualized all the time, and when I started doing these works, which were kind of more in the spirit of other artists in Vancouver, Jeff Wall, Ian Wallace, Stan Douglas, people that really influenced me, I kind of thought I'd like to do something that's more kind of direct, and the way I could do that was really to limit the images to ones that I could do as a performer. The Halcyon Sleep piece that we were showing, that's a piece that I was thinking of doing since the 70s. It kind of was a bit of a breakthrough in the sense that it was the first piece I did where I used myself as a performer, kind of performing in a kind of degree zero way, i.e. sleeping.
Had himself sedated, driven through the night to some other location while wearing the best pajamas and bathrobe that money could possibly have bought. And that was part of what made it wonderful.
It's kind of the easiest thing to do, I have to say. I mean, that was the first performance that I did, was me sleeping. The Vexation Island is a kind of grand sublimation of that piece.
From the very beginning, I was always impressed with the level of production value that he managed to insist on. So Vexation Island didn't surprise me that he would produce something that complex and expensive and sort of perfectly done. It just seemed a logical extension.
And of course, the more you see that film in a loop, it unravels itself, and the madeness of the work appears. And I think that madeness is what kind of drives Rodney's work, the process of making. I mean, it's like a montage, collage.
I mean, I've made several narrative films, Vexation Island, How I Became a Ramblin' Man, and City Self, Country Self, but I'm not really interested in creating narratives. I don't have any ambition to make a feature film. I kind of prefer making these more structural films, you know? I mean, the pieces that I did that we're showing that have used film, I mean, some of them really are about film. The projectors in the space, it's part of the installation. And that's really important.
These are huge projectors in the space. They're competing with the image. And so to me, it's a kind of it's a confrontation of both subjects and mediums, and the attention is as much on the image as the making of the image.
I guess I was thinking specifically of this experiment of Newton's that I read about, where he wound a bucket of water to observe the surface and then let it spin out. For some reason I was struck by it, and I had wanted to do something with a chandelier, so it kind of came to me. And I do like making these films that are single roll films that can be documented in a single roll, that don't involve editing, that involve a single concept. kind of a thought experiment.
When you look at coruscating cinnamon granules, the film starts out in the cosmos, but you land in the kitchen. In between, you also visit the planet of Robert Smithson. I think the spiral is the ultimate symbol of pataphysics. I mean, you can read all these things into it, so it's quite a trip.
And he turns on the burner and it lights up and he sprinkles that cinnamon, and it was literally alchemy to my eyes. And you find yourself just sinking into that velvety darkness of that surface and imagining all the stars and worlds and lives and concepts and knowledge that it holds.
He's very open to talking about how he makes his pictures, where he gets his inspiration from. Very rarely does he talk about what it means. And that's what makes it quite both difficult for the viewer, but also gives it its allure, I suppose. As much as your exhibition is called That's Not Me, there's always an element of Rodney in the work, personal references.
I remember you'd been asking me, very patiently waiting for a title, and this kind of came to me in a little bit of a sort of delirium when I wasn't feeling so well. I just thought, that's not me. I just was thinking of the Beach Boys song from Pat Sounds, of course, one of the great albums of all time. And I thought, well, it's kind of good because on the one hand, it's kind of paradoxical, obviously, because it is me in these photographs. And it is just a kind of a beautiful, evocative song, and it just seemed to work.
That's not me. 3 simple words and you can write an entire book about that.
The form for the photographic light boxes, how did that develop in your mind?
I mean, I started doing, I guess, when I used myself as a sort of photographic subject, I started with a couple of photographs. And then, I mean, obviously, Jeff Wall's use of light box was kind of blatantly, I kind of gave it a try, and I thought, well, it's kind of his thing, but on the other hand, I just couldn't resist using them,
There's a danger with light boxes, I think, that they have a tendency to be a bit cold, a little bit clinical, a little bit scientific, a little bit too much of a thinking process. Rodney brings warmth and humanity to it. His light boxes are never cold. You feel the magic of this backlit image. That's never the overwhelming experience. It's simply this glow of a world for you to enter.
I kind of like working with this idea of diptychs and triptychs, and using the formal limit of the printing possibility. I mean, working with those breaks and composing with them, and it's a kind of a constraint that kind of leads to interesting possibilities. I suppose it draws attention maybe to the artifice of the whole thing in a way, but I just kind of formally find it attractive. I think we both thought the 4 seasons would be good together. 4 seasons of smoking, characters smoking in different contexts. One of them not smoking. Maybe he's taking a break from smoking, like a healthy break, It started with this little piece here. The subtitle is Sous Chef on Smoke Break. And I saw this guy kind of smoking by a hedge. So I reconceptualized it as a guy having a break from a restaurant in an arboretum. And in fact, there is one in Vancouver. And he's taking a break under a tree. It actually has a label of the type of tree on it. And I wanted this idea of a reverie relating to nature, the smoke kind of dissolving into the air. I made this other piece called The Drywaller. It's a guy plastering a wall, and he's kind of having a break on the stills. I actually saw that again on Main Street too. So then I thought, well, I'll do 2 more and make 4 seasons. It'd be kind of a funny idea.
When I look at it, I see Vancouver. I see everything from the sort of outdoorsy nature we have here. I see our connection with the environment, which is a huge thing here in Vancouver. I see a man on a journey.
It probably speaks so much of Rodney and not just Vancouverism, but Canadiana.
But you can also see literally what we envision as the typical art painting.
It's a piece that I'd kind of wanted to do for a while in the context of my interest in this painting by Thomas Eakins called Max Schmidt in a Single Skull. And then I kind of thought, well, this would be really good for fall. And I had an opportunity to shoot it in the fall on Seymour River in Vancouver. I kind of thought about what I would do for spring, I went back to this image of Stroheim, who often starred in his own films. They were kind of Ruritanian kind of fantasies, and there's a photograph of him behind the camera in a military, kind of a Prussian military uniform. I kind of thought, well, that's sort of an interesting context, the idea of actor-director, which is kind of what I do in a way. It is very much about myself in that sense, a true self-portrait, I guess. I kind of decided on a Technicolor film of the 50s. I often like to deal with this idea of two different pasts, the 18th century viewed through the 1950s.
The newspaper works. It wasn't calculated that I will do 6 of them over the next 10 years. It slowly came together. I think one of the most important works we own is The Gifted Amateur.
The Gifted Amateur is about a guy who's like painting in his living room, and in 1961 he's just come back from New York and seen a Morris Louis show, and he's kind of galvanized by this. He's like a middle-aged or older guy. Naturally, he might put newspaper down on the floor, and I was kind of interested in that in the context of Picasso's use of newspapers. So I actually had these newspapers made, which was one of the most complicated parts of making this picture, was to have these newspapers reconstructed.
And I think the irony in that is just so smart. There's like such a confidence to the character that he puts it in, as anybody can do this. But then you take Rodney, the artist, and look at the newspaper, look at the dates on the newspaper, that detail that doesn't need to be taken care of, but he takes care of it.
I kind of guess I was still thinking about this newspaper idea when I made this piece called The Avid Reader, which is again based on an observation of somebody actually on Main Street. I was just driving by and we saw an artist friend of ours just standing looking in a shop window that was completely covered with newspapers, and it kind of led me to the idea of reconstructing a Woolworths. So I set the piece in 49 because I was interested again in this double past or idea of recent past. But the newspapers are from 1945, just after the end of the Second World War. So it's a guy looking, in 1949, looking at newspapers from 1945 and kind of looking back on perhaps his own experience in the war or whatever.
He's also an avid reader, I think, of the surface, the glass, the space between him and the newspaper. So that's kind of what interested me, was this kind of focus on, and even the touching of the glass. Because in the glass you also see reflections. I would imagine that what he sees in the reflection is a woman walking away. It's like street photography on a monumental level. It was shot in his studio, not unlike the way, let's say, Hitchcock would create a set in a Hollywood studio.
I wanted to make a smaller piece related to newspapers, and I had collected these. And I thought I would do something with the comics pages. Again, I was thinking quite specifically of a scene in the Hitchcock film, Lady Vanishes. It's a scene where Chalmers and Caldecott, the two kind of comic British characters, are forced to share a hotel room in some unnamed fascist country on the eve of the Second World War. There's a scene where the cleaning person comes in and sees this two hands holding a newspaper.
Well, a word about cricket. Americans got no sense of proportion. Come in.
I always liked that kind of gag, so I kind of set it up. And actually, so I have like Josh from the studio and Scott on either side. So their hands are slightly different if you look really carefully. And they're in this kind of colorful chenille bedspread and colorful wallpaper behind it. The date is 37. It's around the same time that Hitchcock made that film. And I was thinking of these 3 works, and then I thought it would be nice for the show to make a 4th work. And so I kind of came up with this idea called Newspaper Man, which is a guy who's maybe some kind of spy or some kind of voyeur hiding behind a newspaper which has eye holes cut in it. And again, this is kind of a trope from American cartoons you've seen quite a bit.
Rodney's always had quite a wide now.
There's sort of a boyishness to how he looks at the world, how he enjoys it, how he's open to it.
And a wonderful nerdy passion for various kinds of popular art.
He has a wondrous way of looking at life and people and the world and objects. And when you look at one of his artworks, that connects with you. You share that wonder. And there's so much respect he extends to everything and everyone around him.
Rodney was the water skier. Wait till I tell you. His dad made him a round board. He would use this, flip a little chair on this round board and sit on it. And you stood on your head on that board.
Yeah, I used to do stuff for the people on the beach.
He'd stand on his head on the
really, when you think about it now.
This was our summer
Those were my
entertainment.
exhibitionistic
Yeah, you were fantastic. This was at the end of high school. Suddenly life changed for you, Rodney. Music and art became his life.
Being an artist is not a bad day job. It's not that bad.
Put my career on the back burner to write country songs about nothing in particular. They said you're good, but you're not that good. Don't give up the day job just yet. Well, it's a cause for celebration that I got this far. I'm gonna throw myself a party and invite my mom and pa. They think I'm good. Fact is, I'm not that good. Can't give up the day job just yet.